My name is Melissa Thorne. Joining me today is Nellie Brown, and today's date is June 8th, 2019. Thank you for being here today and doing this interview with me, Nellie.
Well, it's nice to be with you.
I would love.
And I hope I do really good.
Oh, I'm sure you absolutely will.
I'll try.
Can you please describe to me some of your first memories of Mount Airy?
Well, I was born in 1925 on a farm, just a little town out of Mount Airy called Woodersville. But Mount Airy has always been my home because that's where all the activities were. And that's where we shopped. And my dad would come up to the milling company to get his feed for the animals. Sometime my mom would come along. She would select the bags, because he did have some pretty bags. And she would use the bags to make clothes or dresses for us girls. And they were very pretty. And that's where we shopped. And
can you name a few of the stores that would have been in the downtown at that time?
oh, well, there was People's Lumber and Supply, and also a lot of the brick that's in the University of Maryland College was brought from Mount Airy, from People's Lumber, down to, for the building of the University of Maryland.
No kidding.
Oh, yes. And then, of course, there was Vic Barnes that had the stationery and music store. And also Vic Barnes was our organist at Calvary Methodist Church, which I attended and still do. And then there was Gendel, the jewelry store, and Mars Hardware. And then there was the community reporter. Well, first there was a barber shop. Howard Etchison had the barber shop. And then the community reporter later moved in there. And behind that was, in the same building, was a little beauty shop. And that was on one side of the street, and then the Lindsay Browning store. And then Henley tea store, or tea shop. And then there was the Flatiron building, which had Jasper Pryor was a barber. And then Howard Hood had the shoe repair. And he was a smart guy. He was deaf, but he was a smart guy. People would come in and pick up their shoes if they were finished, and sometime he wouldn't be in the shop. So they would pick up the shoes and go. So he caught on to that. So he waited until, sometime it was just a little bit to do, like smooth the sole or something, but they'd have to wait till he finished it. That way he was sharp. Nobody got a shoe without being finished.
Oh, yeah.
And then across the street there was clothing store, Wilkins, and then another one on down from that. And then there was a furniture and appliance store, Hipsley and Burdett, and it was several before that. Mm-hmm. And then there was Tops Market, which was also A&P at one time. Mm-hmm. And then Dorsey's was the P.S. Dorsey. And then it was the Acme store with Harry Bellison was the manager at the time. And then Smith & Wagner, had the grocery store. And above the grocery store was Dr. Hopkins. He was the dentist. And he had the front window was where he had his chair. Yeah. And then there was a drugstore, Mars Hardware, a drugstore. And Chester Hood had the feed store. Mm-hmm. And then there was the 5 and 10, first it was Mr. Hood had it first. There was a clothing store there. And later it became 5 and 10, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've heard a lot about the 5 and dime.
5 and dime,
Everybody talks about
that's right.
That.
Uh-huh. And then, of course, on down from that was the milling company, which everybody knows burned. And then the Farmers Mechanics Bank. And then on above that was our local doctor, Dr. J. Stanley Grable. And he had 2 children, John and Ann. And little John got killed in front of the house. He was 6 years old. got struck by a car. And then there was this little store, little gas station, and something happened to it. I don't know whether it blew up or not, but he had this sign, 5 gals for $1. And we kids would laugh, 5 gals.
Right.
That was funny for kids. And then, of course, the train station, naturally, which is still there.
Yes.
And
so in 1925, was the train still taking passengers to Baltimore?
oh yeah,
Okay. Do you have any memories of that, seeing people
I
come
remember
on up?
having to sit and wait for the train to go through
Right.
on the way to Baltimore, and then some of the women, particularly the one that I remember distinctly, was in Woodbine, and she rode the train to Baltimore to get her license to be a beautician. Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause
And then they would come and pick up the farmer's milk, take to Baltimore,
Okay.
and the mail. And I'm not really sure, just something like 1949 rings a bell with me on how the last time that the train went through. That I'm not really positive of. But I remember them coming through. Yeah. It was a good life.
it was a true small town
Yes.
at that point.
That's right.
And then when did you move to Mount Airy?
When
When did you move to town? And when did you
it was,
become a regular?
I would say probably 1943.
And what house did you move into?
Across from the chapel, and well, right across from there was, I can't think of their name now, but anyhow, he had the insurance. And
Burdette?
And when he had a tin cup that he'd give as advertisement, and it said in the bottom of it, it said, "When you drink, think of A. Frank Miller." And he lived there with his 2 sisters. And then right down from there was 2 houses down was where Mr. Burdette that had the store on Main Street. Yeah.
And which store was that? What was his?
It was Hipsley and Burdette.
Oh, the appliance
but
and
it's
furniture.
appliance,
Okay.
furniture and appliance.
And so you were across the street from Calvary, close to the church?
Well, I was down more, down just a little bit from there.
Okay. Did that church change at all over the
Oh,
years?
it's been added on.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
It started with the stone facade section and then kind of grew from there?
I don't remember exactly how everything went, but they tore part of it, they tore the parsonage down and put an addition onto the church, and that hasn't been too many years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But then this was during the war, too.
Oh.
And my 2 brothers were drafted, and my older brother, Walter, went to Germany. He spent his time there. And Leon, he was discharged with a medical problem. So he never saw service. He never left the state. And but then then in 1944, I met my husband when I was a senior in high school, and he worked at Spalding's Garage in Poplar Springs. He was the office manager there. So in 1944, we had already moved to Mount Airy, and
Did your husband go to the same school as you?
no, he went to Montgomery County.
Okay.
Yes. So we were married then, and we moved out on Penn Shop Road. We rented a house, and we lived there for 1 year. And across from the house was a peach orchard, Walker's Peach Orchard. And they would bring the German POWs out to pick peaches.
Oh, wow.
And they would wave at me, scared to death.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yes, but of course they were well supervised. Yeah. And then I was in a carpool, and we went to Rockville. This was during the war, and I worked in an assembly line. We didn't know what we were making because it was the war. And but at the end, we were told that we were making, now I think I remember this correctly, and I may be wrong, but we were told we were making gyros for bomb sites.
Wow.
Which we did not know, of course, what we were making.
What kind of materials were you working with?
It was just an assembly line, and we soldered whatever.
Okay.
It's been so long, I don't remember exactly. But it was very interesting, you know, at the time. Yeah.
And they had to train you, I'm guessing, on how to solder.
Oh, yeah.
You didn't know how to solder before?
And we were given our solder irons when we left. I still have it somewhere, I'm sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you ever use it for anything?
My husband used it a couple times.
Okay.
So I don't know where it is, but
Right.
anyhow, when we left,
Yeah.
when the year was up, her husband came home from the service, so she wanted her house back. So we moved into an apartment on the 3rd floor down on Woodersville Road, and that's where the daughter was born there.
Oh, okay.
And then we left there and we bought a house on Carroll Avenue. And we had that for quite a few years until we built a house in 1961 up on Plainview Avenue. But there were so many things that, one thing in particular that I remember was we had this ice cream place. It was Twin Kiss, and on 27 going toward Damascus. And by this time I was working the telephone company. I was a switchboard operator. And on one Sunday morning, we knew something happened because we could tell by the line that came in. I don't recall exactly what it was, but we knew something had happened. We knew it was Twin Kiss because we knew the number. And it blew up that Sunday morning.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I don't think it was anybody hurt or anything. I never heard of it. Never heard about that. But
And that was the end of the
that was the end of
ice cream there.
That was the end of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tell me more about your time as a telephone operator.
Well, those were the days. Yeah. And 3 of us could work at a time. And we had 799 was the highest that the numbers went. But it was a lot more lines than that because then we had like a JR, M, and W would have been like.
Which is what? What does that mean?
That would be your telephone number.
Oh,
like
okay.
it was just, say 286J14, you know, just, and that's where you would work at JR, M, and W. That would designate the phone number that you want. And the only time and most time that I worked there, I started in the 50s, and we went dial in September of 1966, and I was working that night when we laughed and pulled the plug. But it was amusing when a call would come in, if it were somebody that needed help or something, or a fire. If a fire call came in, we would take the information, where and when and what, and then we would get down from the board, go around back and pull the alarm to sound the alarm, and then we'd go back and put our headset on and go to work, and then by this time the fireman would come and answer the call, and we'd tell them where it was and what it was, and it was amusing because we could tell whether they were going the right direction to the fire by the lights that come on the switchboard, because people would call, want to know where the
That's so
problem
true.
was.
Okay.
Yeah.
That still happens today. People are always calling in and
Yeah,
seeing what's
probably.
happening, where's a helicopter flying over town, different things. That's interesting. So you could see in different, or you knew, I guess, what was lighting up the zones
Oh,
where
sure.
that was coming from. Wow.
Uh-huh.
Do you have any other stories about maybe an emergency during a parade that might have happened?
Yes, this one night, it was during the Mount Airy Firemen's Parade on a Thursday. And our local doctor, Dr. Caldwell, called in and said that he was going to be watching the parade because everybody did. They didn't need a doctor. They were watching the parade. So we took the call, and he said he would be out front watching the parade. So I took the call, and this lady said that her child had consumed kerosene and needed a doctor right away, which I could understand. So I got down from the switchboard, and of course there were others working, and I went up the street between the parade, in and out, to find Dr. Caldwell, and told him that he had an emergency call. So of course he took the call. Never heard how the child made out or whatever.
Where was the telephone company located? On what street?
Right there on Main Street.
On Main Street, okay.
It was 2 houses from the old firehouse.
Okay.
And talking about the firehouse, where the parking lot is now between the old firehouse and the apartment house, there was a little store there, Mr. Clay. And when my dad, we'd always go to Mount Airy on Friday or Saturday night. This was to see people, find out news, or shop, or whatever. But my dad would give a nickel, sounded like much today, but it was a lot then. But he'd give each one of us kids a nickel. And I would go to Mr. Clay, because he had the biggest ice cream cones in town. And it was a big one for a nickel.
Yeah.
And with us kids, you know, that was a big deal.
That sounds like a great...
We looked forward to Friday or Saturday night. And then when you shopped in town, you were given, I don't know just how it worked, but on Friday night then they would have a drawing. Your name was put into a barrel or whatever. And they would have a drawing. And I don't know what they give or what they did, but if your name was drawn, I think it was some of the stores would give, you know, like a little something in it. But it drew the crowd. And, you know, you got to see all your neighbors, and it was really neat.
Yeah, that sounds like neat. What a special time to be in Mount Airy when everybody was really local and they worked locally. What did your parents do during that time? Or were your parents still on the farm, I guess?
My dad always farmed.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
What did you say what your husband did for a living?
Well, when I first met him, he was working for Spalding,
Right.
Spalding's Garage in Poplar Springs. And then later he went to work with the Burdett Agency,
Okay.
Insurance and Real Estate. They're on Main Street in Mount Airy.
So you both were local. Did you ever see each other for lunch or anything?
No,
Okay.
but when he worked downtown on Main Street, but this time we were living on Plainview Avenue, so he could come home for lunch or.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you speak to any of the other events? You mentioned the parade.
Oh, we always
downtown,
had
and
parades.
the
Look forward to that. And our first carnival that I can recall was up on. It's now the town park. And at one time there were 3 houses on that lot. And then they had the pavilion where they would hold dances, or churches would hold meetings in there. And that's where they had the carnival. That was the earliest that I remember, so that was quite a while back.
Yeah, up at Wildwood Park?
Wildwood
That's
Park,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
So now it's a beautiful park.
It is, and it's hard for me to imagine the carnival being there with all the trees.
Well, it's not. It wasn't big then like it is now. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then Mrs. Reed would put on plays, at least one a year, and not too often at that. But she was a director, and then Helen Simpson took care of the wardrobe.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
What
And
were some of the plays about? Like,
You know,
Can you
and
remember?
I was in them, but I cannot remember even the name of the plays. But the parades and that, there was always a little something. Then at Christmas, they would have judging of the doors, and that was a big deal.
Wow. Everybody had to decorate it to the nines.
The ones that did, not everybody. And it wasn't just in town, it was outlying areas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Did you
know,
just have to sign up
developments
for
around.
it? Okay. Did you just have to sign up to be a part of the contest?
I'm not sure, but I would suspect that you
Right.
did.
Yeah. Wow. I never had heard about that event
Oh, yes.
before.
Yeah, that was a big deal.
Okay.
And some of them were really, really pretty. Yeah.
Did your daughter go to Mount Airy
See,
Elementary and all the schools?
we lived, as I said, we lived on Carroll Avenue. And by living in town, you had a choice of what school you wanted to go, whether it was Linganore or Mount Airy. And I don't know to this day why she chose Linganore, but she was very active there. In fact, up in the new school, which is now, there is a picture of her and a friend holding the National Honor Society badge.
Oh, awesome.
Yes. But of course, I lost her. And but it's good to see her picture there today.
So that's in the current school.
Yes.
I'll have to go up. I'm a Linganore graduate
Oh, you are.
as well. Yep. So awesome. Well,
And then when she graduated there, then she went to Maryland. Well, first she went to Reading, Pennsylvania first, Albright College.
Okay.
And she went there 2 years. Then she transferred to Maryland and finished her degree there.
yeah. Can you talk, Nellie, to the changes over the years of town from the 50s, 60s to today, and maybe speak to what are some of your favorite spots to hang out today?
Well, I don't know. It hasn't really changed a whole excessively. But everybody keeps their homes so pretty now.
Yeah.
And they did back then, you know. But it was just so many memories there to know. And of course, there's been a lot of changes with the stores, you know, with the new ones that where it burned.
Right.
Of course, there was a milling company that burned, and then the B.S. Dorsey, and I forget, there was another one that was a big.
The People's Lumber and Supply on the corner isn't there anymore. But was that a fire right next to where the train depot is on Center Street?
No, that was the People's Lumber and Supply is there, which is now the train where they sell trains.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And then upstairs in the People's Lumber building, there was Mr. Ballas, the town
reporter.
attorney.
And the town attorney.
Pete's,
Right.
Pete's dad.
Right.
And then Hobbs Barbershop was in there. Yeah, because we had 3 barbershops. Hobbs, and then Etchison, and Mr. Pryor. Because my brother Leon worked with Mr. Pryor for a little while.
Yeah.
It's been so many changes. Yeah. And
Yeah.
most of them have been good.
That's good to hear.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Mount Airy has expanded throughout the years. We added a few shopping centers,
Oh,
a
yeah.
few residential units, not just units, but neighborhoods. So that's added, and more people driving around.
Oh, yes.
And
Yeah.
that's and we're more of a commuter town now
Oh, yeah.
than what we were at the farming community, but we still are. We
Right.
still have those roots. It's nice to hear that. There's still those roots too. Okay. So you belong to Calvary United Methodist. Did you belong to any other organizations in town?
I belong to the Eastern Star, which I still do.
Okay.
But it's no longer in Mount Airy. we have holding the meetings now over in Union Bridge.
Oh, okay.
And of course, there was the theater, which is a big thing in Mount Airy, and Mr. Jones had the theater.
What was that like when that was alive and well?
Well, you had to know Mr. Jones.
Okay.
But you go in, and he always walked the aisles. I had this long flashlight, and if he saw a young man have crossed his legs with the toe of the shoe against the front seat, he would take the flashlight and he'd tap them on them that they weren't supposed to have their foot on the seat in front.
That was a polite way, right, of
Right.
kind of notifying them.
That's right.
Oh, wow.
It was amusing, but there was always something to do. And at one time, they upstairs in the Riddle Moser building, there was the old time theater where they played the music in silent film.
Oh.
And I had been trying to remember why I would have been up there, because I would have been very young. But I can't recall what the show was, but all I can remember is the piano player, because I've always loved music. And that was up in the upstairs in the Riddle Moser building. And then at one time, Potomac Edison had, in the lower level of the building, you could go in and pay your electric bill. Or if you needed a part for something, you could go in there, and Mr. Selby would wait on you.
Okay.
And Mr. Selby lived on Main Street, out where the Warfield building burned.
Yes, yes.
Oh, and out on Ridgeville, there at the corner, on the right at the light, was Ridgeville Nurseries. They had a little building there where you go in and order your flowers or whatever.
Yeah.
And then across the street from that was King's Corner, which is now the new gas station.
Oh.
And they had this little restaurant downtown in the lower level. And you go in and order your food, and Mr. King would take the order and put it in a dumbwaiter. And he, on this dumbwaiter, he would take the order up, and the food would come down on that. And then,
Wow.
And then across from that was the hotel. And in front of that one, at Christmas time, they dug a hole and they put a man down in there live, and you put money there and you could look down and see him. And then next to that was, and of course, then it went to Jones Motors, which is now
The bank.
the bank.
Right.
That's right. Then next to that was an apartment house, because my sister lived in one of the apartments.
Okay.
And then it was Brown's that had the little restaurant where the young people go and dance and so forth. And that's where I had my first Coke.
Oh, yay.
Yes.
Can you back up just one quick second and explain what the man was doing in the hole again? So you would put money to...
This was during the war, and this is when he would, anything to make money.
Yeah.
And that's how he,
Oh.
and I think they kept him there for a week. Now, I'm sure they took him out, you know. He
Fed
didn't
him maybe and...
I don't know that, but
Yeah.
I remember looking down and I saw him.
Wow, that's just bizarre, you know?
I mean, it sounds odd, doesn't it?
It does, it does.
But it is true, though.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people would really remember it, but I know for a fact it was there. Yeah.
So we only have about a few seconds left, Nellie.
Okay.
Could you say, what are your hopes for the future of Mount Airy?
I'm hoping great things for Mount Airy, because Mount Airy has a lot to offer people. And if we get a lot of good people in, which we are getting, which is very nice. And right now, the big topic is the Flatiron Building. And I have mixed emotions on that, because it's a lot of memories goes into that building, and yet I can understand both ways. So, and I'm sure, knowing the people that run the town, particularly our mayor, which is great, I'm sure that they'll decide what is really the best for Mount Airy, because I still have a lot of good hopes and big hopes for Mount Airy. It's going to be great.
Thank you, Nellie Brown, for this interview today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you and learning more about our town of Mount Airy.
It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank
and
you.
I hope I give some truthful information. This is, to my knowledge, every word is true.
Okay, thanks, Nellie.
Nice being with you.